And welcome back to Bengal Bites, a podcast about the Cincinnati Bengals from a real, honest perspective. I'm your host, Derek. This is episode 117, the Week 14 preview episode where the Cincinnati Bengals season continues to still have some signs of hope, no matter how bleak things were looking. That one win turned everything around. Now everybody's back on the bandwagon all of a sudden. But the Bengals are going up to Buffalo to take on the Bills, who are 8-4. Bengals are 4-8. Bills are 8-4. Bills are not leading their division, however, as the Bengals just played the New England Patriots, who have the best record in the NFL right now. I think they're 11-2. The Bills are going to need that wild card spot to get in. They just came off a pretty convincing win over the Pittsburgh Steelers. But the Bengals just came off, I wouldn't say it was a convincing win against the Baltimore Ravens. It was a win. And any win at this point in the season, especially how this season has been going, Bengals fans will take it. The weather is looking pretty cold. It's been a very cold week here in the Midwest or Northeast part of the country. And Bengals are looking pretty healthy coming into this game. T. Higgins is supposed to be coming back. He's back from that concussion he suffered 2 weeks ago. Bills are going to be without one of their top pass rushers in Joey Bosa. They're getting some of their injured guys back, but I would say the Bengals are more healthy overall as a roster than the Buffalo Bills right now. But Buffalo was successful running the football against the Steelers. They had something like over 250 yards, breaking all kinds of records, the Bills did, against this Steelers defense. And so it's going to be interesting to see, without Trey Hendrickson again, can this Bengals defense continue the better play that they've shown the last couple of weeks and slow down this Bills offensive attack. Bills are favored by about 6, 5.5, 6.5, depends on where you look, but Bills are favored not quite by a touchdown, let's say. That's not a surprise given the record and the fact that they're playing in Buffalo, but it's not totally out of the realm of possibility for the Bengals to pull off the upset in this game, just like they did in Baltimore. Maybe they get, same formula as last week, maybe turnovers, special teams. It might not just come down to Joe Burrow versus Josh Allen, which is, of course, what the media is going to play this up as. It's going to be the battle of the two-star quarterbacks. That's what everybody is most familiar with, at least. Each fan base thinks their quarterback should be MVP. Josh Allen actually won the MVP last year. Joe Burrow did not because the Bengals didn't make it to the playoffs. Speaking of last year, it's so bizarre to me how the Bengals, they still only have 4 wins on the entire season, but people are acting like they're in first place and like everything is going their way just because Joe Burrow came back from that injury. They won a game, and now like everybody automatically thinks the Bengals are going to win every single game from here on out. They're going to make it to the playoffs and win the Super Bowl. I would say pump the brakes on that a little bit. Like, just because they won a game, everybody was saying that the Bengals season is saved. Joe Burrow saved the season. But if we just think about not that long ago, Joe Flacco came in and won a game on Thursday night against the Steelers, and everybody was saying, oh, Joe Flacco saved the season. Oh, my gosh, it's back on track. And then Joe Flacco had a couple bad games where he threw a couple bad pick sixes, and then all of a sudden everybody was like, let's get Joe Flacco out of here. Get Joe Burrow back in there. He's going to save the season. I'm not saying Joe Burrow isn't better than Joe Flacco at this point in his career. Obviously, somehow Joe Burrow coming off of that surgery on his toe was still more mobile and able to make plays happen outside of the pocket than Joe Flacco. As soon as Joe Flacco got any kind of pressure in his face, he was just throwing the ball straight in the dirt. He didn't want any part of getting sacked, especially after he had that shoulder injury on his right throwing AC joint. I'm sure it didn't feel good. Didn't feel especially great getting driven straight into the ground by all these defensive linemen. So he was not trying to take any hits. I don't want to see Joe Burrow take any hits either, but he's a little bit more spry these days than Joe Flacco. But really the whole I don't know what you would call it, like Bengals Homer fan groupthink. It just drives me crazy. That's part of the reason why I had to make this podcast, because so many of these podcasts about the Bengals, or like I would call them, really, some of these shows and reporters act like they are on the Bengals payroll, and their job, they think, is to kind of be like the unofficial marketing department for the team. So they'll pretty much just parrot and repeat everything that the team puts out there or wants them to say, or what they want the narrative to be about the team. So they'll shy away from any kind of negative stories or criticism and really try to play up all the positives. So you saw like the questions coming at the players this week. They won one game and they're like, oh, you guys have been playing so much better lately. What's the difference? Is it Joe Burrow? Is he just making that much of a difference? And it's just all like they're trying to build up this narrative of all of a sudden the Bengals got good again. And still, they can't just wipe away what they did for the whole rest of the season and say, oh, that wasn't really what the team was going to be like. Now is when we really start playing. Well, it's already like the season's halfway over. And yeah, like I said, the games count the same no matter if they're in December or in October. The record is still 4-8. It's not looking good. And I'm reminded of that 9 Inch Nails song. Great song called I Do Not Want This. And I'm not saying that's my feeling right now, but one of the lyrics in I Do Not Want This on the Downward Spiral album is, I'm made of clay. I fear I'm the only one who thinks this way. And then later on in the song, he's like screaming about, don't tell me how to feel. You don't know how I feel. And that's kind of how I feel. I feel like I'm the only one being reasonable and not jumping on the absolute insanity bandwagon of everybody telling me, oh, the Bengals have a chance. Oh, they're going to do it. Oh, let's get excited about the Bengals again. I was already excited. I've been excited for the entire season. I can't get any more excited. They've already broken my heart like 8 different times. Like I said, I can't keep going through this cycle of, oh, but this year they're going to go. Like, let's just think about this. People are saying, this is exactly where they were last year. Well, what happened last year? Did they make it to the playoffs last year? No. They were 4-8 last year. Oh, they're going to win all the games. So what? It doesn't matter. They're still probably not going to make it to the playoffs. The only saving grace that they have is that Baltimore and Pittsburgh are both 6-6 right now. But the only issue with that is Baltimore and Pittsburgh still have to play each other. So somebody's got to win one of those games. They're probably not going to get like a tie on both games. One of those teams is going to get a win that's going to make their record that much better than what the Bengals have. Overall for the season, Buffalo is number 1 in the NFL in rushing yards, 155 rushing yards per game. And up until recently, the Bengals were number 32 in the NFL in rushing yards allowed. Right now, they're number... let me see. I was looking at the wrong statistics for the Bengals on defense. Hey, Bengals are only number 31 in rushing yards allowed. They allow 153. Bengals defense is still bottom of the NFL in overall yards per game and in points per game. And then if we look at Buffalo is 5th in the league in points scored, just over 28 points per game. They're only allowing 21 points per game. Cincinnati, on the other hand, is allowing over 31 points per game. And, that's the whole season. So if you listen to everybody in the Bengals media, the Bengals are suddenly like a playoff contender. Everybody's playing well. The rookies that were terrible are not terrible anymore. And they're healthy. And maybe it has a little bit of something to do with the fact that Dalton Reznor started his second game, and the offensive line, I don't watch offensive line that closely, but there hasn't been that much pressure on the quarterbacks, Joe Flacco or Joe Burrow. They haven't taken a ton of sacks recently, so I could say not only in the passing game, but also in the running game. Their run blocking has been much better. Chase Brown has been getting a lot of good carries, along with Samaje Perine. Getting him back was a big boost in the arm for this Bengals offense. They're going to have T. Higgins, Mike Gesicki, so many tight ends. And then there was even talk about Eric All, who has been injured all of this season. He might come back, which they've already got so many tight ends. They got Drew Sample, Mike Gesicki, Noah Fant, Tanner Hudson catching one-handed touchdown passes. I don't know if they have room on the roster for Eric All to come back this season, but that would be a nice story, of course. He's been out with that re-torn ACL. He had another surgery. So I would say, let's not rush it back this time, Eric All. Just, if you need to take another few months to get back to 100% healthy, go ahead and do it. Looking at the weather report, it says there's going to be definite snow in the area. Not even a chance of snow. It's going to be apparently snowing light to begin the game. Temperatures around 30 miles an hour. Wind about 6 miles an hour, gusting up to 12. And last time the Bengals had that playoff game in Buffalo, it was snowing, and they didn't have any problem running. They had Joe Mixon back then, but Bengals were able to pull off the victory in Buffalo. But Buffalo traditionally is a very good team in December. This time of the year, they are one of the best in the league, especially at home. Buffalo's defense is okay. Like I said, they don't have Joey Bosa. They're not going to have Terrell Bernard, middle linebacker, either. They tried to get Darius Slay to join the team, but he didn't report to the team. But they've got Tre'Davious White, Jordan Poyer, Cole Bishop, and Christian Benford in the defensive backfield with Teron Johnson. It's going to be a tough assignment to guard T. Higgins and Jamar Chase and all the rest of these tight ends and backs and receivers. But since 2020, the Bills are 23-4 in regular season games in December and later, which is the best in the NFL. But Joe Burrow in December is 18-5. So almost as good as the Bills. So it's going to be a battle of who can come out on top. Realistically, I think the Bills are probably who I would expect to win this game, but it's so hard to count out Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. As long as they get a decent offensive line performance, in theory, they should be able to stay with any team in the NFL. It doesn't matter how good they are. And the Bengals are coming off that extra rest. They played on Thanksgiving on Thursday, so they have an extra 3 days of rest to recover to go to Buffalo. So they should be totally healthy and ready to go. One of the other things that's interesting is how quickly the Jamar Chase story about him spitting on Jalen Ramsey all got not really forgotten about, but put on the back burner by a lot of people. As soon as Joe Burrow comes back, that's the whole story. They're not writing about Jamar Chase and the Bengals anymore. It's all about Joe Burrow and what he's doing, all the positive things. And obviously everybody wants to focus on the positive, but it's just the media cycle that we live in. Everything is so disposable, and everybody's acting completely outraged at Jamar Chase one day, and then nobody's really thinking much of it on Thanksgiving and after that. So it all kind of blew over, and nobody thinks he's like some kind of horrible villain or anything like that. But the same thing could also happen. Who knows? People are probably going to be ripping their hair out and going crazy if the Bengals lose this game, and the season will be over again. People are so reactionary. So maybe that's the curse of having a memory longer than like 24 hours is I can remember all of the games that happened. And like I've been saying this entire season, everybody gets so wrapped up in thinking about, well, what if the Bengals had beaten the Jets? And what if they had beaten the Bears? They would have been 6-6 and tied for the lead in the AFC North division instead of 4-8. But nobody ever says, what if the Cleveland Browns had beaten the Bengals in week 2 if the kicker had just made the kick? It could have just as easily gone the other direction. But obviously fans for the Bengals never want to consider both sides of the argument there. But people don't like actual contrarian thinking. Obviously people, I don't know what they want necessarily, but I saw a critique of Stephen A. Smith and the type of shows he does on ESPN now. They're more like theatrical performances. They're not actually any kind of like intellectual debates and like well-informed opinions on things. It's mostly really dumb, ignorant reactions to things that are happening without doing any kind of research or getting any kind of information at all. It's just like, who can be the most outlandish and radical in how far they can take their reactions just to try to get, viewership. But whatever. I could try to do my Stephen A. Smith impression, but I honestly don't watch ESPN that much to really have honed it that well. He's kind of like a minister, but yeah, obviously Stephen A. Smith is not my cup of tea, but some people seem to like him, which is odd. I don't know why, but he keeps remaining on television and getting paid millions of dollars for some reason. I still haven't figured it out. I guess it's all entertainment, just like this whole football business. If they really wanted to win, they would be making much different decisions, but it's not about winning. It's about putting an entertaining product on the field. So that's why we have part-time referees who aren't really that good at spotting the football, but it's part of the entertainment. It's part of the theater of the whole performance of the referee spotting the football. There's probably got to be better ways to do that. But this is, the traditional way of doing it, and that's what everybody wants to see with their eyeballs on the TV, so that's what we get. But I'm going to be back after this game to react one way or the other. It doesn't matter. I'll be back whether they win or lose. Should I make a prediction? Let's make a prediction. I'll say Bengals keep it close. I'm not going to predict a win, but I'll say it'll be a high-scoring game. Let's go 31-34 Bills. Very high-scoring. I don't think it's going to go to overtime, but it'll be close, all the way down to the wire. So that's going to do it for this preview episode. Stay warm. It's been cold and snowing where I've been living, and everybody's coming down with all kinds of illnesses, so make sure to take care of yourselves out there. But until next time, I'm going to leave you with a hooday and stay hungry for more Bengal Bites.